I don't deserve it. You keep giving me so much love, so much love.
It's 6.5 after 7 o'clock here on Sky 99.5 FM. Welcome inside hour number 2 of the Breakfast Roundtable for today, Friday, the 13th of January 2017. We're keeping the focus on the police service and specifically the commissioner causing jaws to drop, and because he wanted some heads to roll for what he says was a lack of proper performance of one's duties. On the line with us now, we have got a member of the Police Service Commission and the Senior Attorney at Law, Martin George. Good morning to you, Martin George.
Morning, Mr. George.
Yes, hi, good morning to you, Jessamy. Good morning, Dr. Wayne. Good morning, Edison. And good morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
All right, so Martin George, the Commission would have had some time to assess the Commissioner's decision and what would have taken place. And we see now that legal action is going to be taken against the Commissioner as well. What is the Commission's position on this particular issue, if any?
Jessamy, I don't want to comment on that in relation to the whole issue as it relates to this matter, because I was just informed that it may be that the commissioner himself may be seeking some guidance from the PSC in relation to this matter. So it would not be appropriate at all for me to comment on it.
All
My
right.
apologies to you.
Okay, so that information has just come to you.
Yes.
Okay. Well, is there any aspect of it at all that you could comment on? Because apart from this issue, there is the issue of the police union going for negotiations, collective agreement negotiations. And some officers, they're looking at what happened with the OWTU, and they're hoping that the police service, gets a very good deal. I've heard word on the ground that if they think the day of total policing was bad, wait till they see what happens next. That kind of talk.
Well, the thing is, in terms of that, I could certainly say that as regards any increases for police officers generally, I think we ought to move to a system where we do any merit increases based on performance. So it must be something that you can justify in terms of your performance. So therefore, it may mean that we have to look at a review of the performance appraisal system within the service, and you therefore are able to have a more detailed analysis of the actual on-the-job performance of officers, and then merit increases would be based on what you see in terms of performance. But otherwise, the thing is, it's not just a matter of saying, well, look, pay police officers more, and therefore that would automatically mean that they would do their jobs better. I don't think it works that way.
But I'm wondering how you're going to assess the performance of a police officer. What are you going to be looking for? Is it that he managed to capture so many bandits? Did he solve so many murders? Did he issue so many tickets? Did he bring in so many people for various violations? Did he have so many drug busts? How do you assess the performance of a police officer? And if you're using certain criteria like numbers, statistics, to say, okay, these are the cases that you would have handled and cases of this nature. Who is to say that does not breed a kind of ugly competition in the service, and also force officers to do things that would make their numbers, to plump them up a bit?
Well, the thing is, there's always that risk, and that's something which has challenged police services the world over when they introduce, a minute, detailed assessment system. But the thing is, at the end of the day, Jessamy, the good of it, I think, far outweighs the bad. So, in other words, while there is always the risk of persons, seeking to, unfairly inflate their own numbers as regards performance, by and large, if it is that you have a merit-based system that is, detailed, and you really are able to get down to the nuts and bolts of it in terms of sections or divisions or departments or even areas of competence, because not everyone is an investigator, not everyone is a detective, not everyone is out there on the field. You have some police officers who purely do administrative functions. So the point is you have to have different criteria for the assessment. But I think if we get to that level, and of course that is not something that can happen overnight. That is something that you'll have to, take some time to implement. But you have to start somewhere. And once we start moving towards that, yes, there would be kinks. Yes, there would be, the occasions where persons may abuse the system. But I think generally the overall effect of it would be more positive than negative.
Overall, earlier on, Mr. George, we were speaking with retired Senior Superintendent Johnny Abraham, and he was lamenting that a lot of police officers are promoted because of academic qualifications, because he would say some of them would lock when they go to the police station, as the case might be, they would lock themselves into their offices and so on and be studying. Whereas he was saying people like him and other people, they were on the ground getting the job done, as the case might be. So in terms of promotion and so on, what would you all look at? Is it getting the job done, the ones who are on the beat, as the case might be, or the ones who are able to get and pass their exams and that sort of thing and get their degrees?
Well, as the system currently operates, it is skewed in favor of the academic qualifications. I could tell you for a fact it is skewed that way, and maybe that may not necessarily be the fairest system, because the point is there are officers who, as Mr. Abraham would rightly say, who are more out on the ground, out on the streets, than those who may be, pursuing academic interests. So therefore, we have to balance it, because the thing is, you certainly don't want someone who is just academically qualified and who knows nothing about actual police work. So, but the system, he is correct in that the way the system functions now, it is skewed more heavily in favor of those with the academic qualification.
At one time, I think about 3 years ago, we were hearing that they were going to abandon police officers who do prosecutions in the court and let them be out on the streets, as the case might be, and let what they call civilianization take over. But that never happened, did it?
Well, the thing is, you recall, that's something I have been advocating for years. I have said it repeatedly, even on this program, in our discussions. I have said that we ought to remove every police officer from the magistrate's court who is doing prosecution work. We have thousands of young attorneys who are out there.
Yes.
Most of them are unemployed. I think the DPP's department can absorb so many more persons. I mean, once the proper arrangements are made for the staffing and the housing and accommodation of these attorneys in their office, and let them do the prosecution work. Because most of the police officers who do the prosecutions in the courts have no formal legal training. Now, they have the experience in that they've been in the court for years, and that's great. But at the end of the day, they are not trained attorneys. And what often contributes to the delays in the judicial system is the fact that we see several instances where once an attorney for the defense presents some, detailed legal submission, then the police prosecutor says, and this happens all the time, they ask for an adjournment, yes, so that they can now refer this legal point to the DPP's department. And I mean, let me explain how it goes. So therefore, they will ask for the adjournment. So the magistrate grants the adjournment. This officer then now has to go back, write up a note, then submit it to the court and process branch. They will then now have to write to the DPP's department submit this legal point to the DPP's department. That then has to go through the system, make its way up to, maybe the DPP or the deputy DPP who may make a decision on it. They will then now have to assign an attorney from their department, so they'll have to check and see workloads and schedules and all of that, and see, well, okay, right, we can assign it to this attorney. That attorney then now has to get back in touch with the court and process branch of the police service. The court and process branch then has to get back in touch with the prosecutor because there may be evidential issues that the DPP's attorney now needs to discuss or find out information from, or they may then require the transcript of the note of evidence, which then requires now an application to the magistrate's court for them to produce the CD with the transcript. This transcript may then have to be sent to be transcribed. So, listen, I could tell you sometimes it takes years. I have seen it. It sometimes takes years to get back a response to a legal submission.
So who can clear this roadblock? What's the one individual? Is it the DPP? Who can clear this roadblock?
Well, the thing is, first of all, I think we have to ensure that legislatively we say that, look, it is not permissible for police officers to prosecute matters. So once you do that legislatively, then you would have to now ensure that it's only attorneys from the DPP's office who would be able to do so. You see, but right now it's permitted. So I think you have to legislate to ensure that, look, you see, look, and of course you give a little time frame so that you have a bleeding out of the officers from the from the magistrate's court, and then a bleeding in of the DPP's officers. So it would take some time, but I think it's one of the things that we can do immediately to make a difference in the judicial system.
As the civilianization of the police service takes place, what is preventing the service itself from having its own legal branch of prosecutors, as in, people with actual legal training to be prosecutors on behalf of the police service, and who may not necessarily have to be attached to the DPP's office? Or should it only just be, the way things are set up, is it only that the DPP's office alone should be doing prosecutions? Is that the
constitutionally? Yes, constitutionally. Remember, the DPP is in charge of all criminal prosecutions constitutionally. Right?
So is it that he can't have some of his people seconded to the police service? For example, we hire the prosecutors, those bright-eyed, bushy-tailed graduates, to be prosecutors, but some of them under the DPP, but some of them are seconded to the police service.
Well, the thing is, once the DPP's office has sufficient attorneys, there really wouldn't be a need to second them to the police service.
Okay.
You would just simply be able to send them straight to the court, where they would then now liaise with the police complainant who may have arrested or charged the person, but the DPP's officer, the attorney from the DPP's office, would be the one conducting the prosecution. So in other words, every magistrate's court where you have criminal matters, you would have an attorney from the DPP's office there sitting as the prosecutor. Instead, what you have in every magistrate's court in Trinidad and Tobago that does prosecutions, you have a police officer sitting there as the prosecutor. And as I said, some of them might have some legal training, but the majority of them don't.
Mr.
And that
George,
is part of the problem.
Isn't it a scandal that when these, whether it's the defense or the prosecution, ask for adjournment, like it's they always get it? Why should magistrates simply succumb or buckle under? I don't know if there's any pressure on them, as the case might be, for repeated adjournments.
Well, okay, given the example that I just used there, the magistrate basically would have absolutely no choice in a scenario where a police officer who is not legally trained is faced with complex legal submissions from a trained attorney. So therefore, if the police officer then says, well, Your Worship, I would like to have an adjournment so I can refer this matter to the DPP, how could the magistrate refuse? Because in other words, you'd then be calling upon someone who is not legally trained to answer detailed legal submissions from an attorney who's legally trained. That could not be fair at all to the prosecution. So therefore, that is one example where the court automatically will grant the adjournment, and you can't blame the court. You can't blame the police prosecutor either, if you understand me. So therefore, we have to blame the system. So therefore, if we recognize that the system we have in place is what is at fault, then we need to change that system and ensure that attorneys are in every magistrate's court as prosecutors. Only attorneys from the DPP's department. Then there's another thing I have suggested again, and I don't know why it has not been implemented yet. In a similar way that we have assistant judges at the High Court and Court of Appeal, we have a system of judicial research assistants, whereby you hire young attorneys straight out of the law school, and they serve as research assistants for the judges and for the justices of appeal. Every magistrate in Trinidad and Tobago should have a judicial research assistant. In other words, when a magistrate is there sitting dealing with a matter and someone makes submissions or they refer to a case, you should have a JRA, a young attorney there, who is the magistrate's judicial research assistant. And that person should be able to be online. So an attorney makes reference to a case. They should be able to pull up the case one time, check it. See, well, okay, is it correct? Are there other cases? Has it been overturned? Has it been appealed? You have sometimes attorneys citing cases and authorities which have been appealed. But of course, the magistrate who is sitting there listening to the evidence, listening to the submissions, doesn't have the time at the moment to double check this. But if you have a judicial research assistant next to you, they could be checking this. They could be saying, well, look, no, my lady, this matter's been appealed. We have looked. Here's the judgment from the Court of Appeal. So what this attorney is suggesting is not the state of the law. These are things that, these are simple things. This is not rocket science. We are in the year 2017, right? All our magistrates' courts should have internet and access so that even attorneys should be able to go online, These are basic things that we can do, and yet still every year we come out, we read nice long speeches, and we trot out statistics as to what we are doing, when some of the fundamental and basic things that we can do just remain undone.
If you could advise members of the public, Mr. George, as far as they go to a police station to make a report of some alleged crime, as the case might be, and they see the police officer at the desk taking a piece of paper under something and say, "Yeah, go ahead now." Isn't it that you must make that report in a diary that can be subpoenaed by the court, as the case might be?
Well, that's a procedure that's supposed to be followed. And you'll recall, I think, our last discussion, I mentioned the question of cameras, and I said that immediately the commissioner ought to implement a system whereby there are cameras throughout every station, and you have a central monitoring unit which would be linked to an internal affairs unit within the police service where you are observing officers, and even that can be linked to your performance appraisal system, because in other words, if you have cameras and you are seeing this corporal at the desk or this constable at the desk who is routinely taking reports and just scribbling something on a piece of paper, then, of course, you'll be able to present him with the evidence and say, well, look, hey, over the last few weeks, on 10, 15 occasions, persons came in to make reports, and this is what happened. Look what you did. You made no entry in the station diary, that kind of thing. So we really have been talking around the topics for years without implementing simple, practical solutions. And, it is important for us to move beyond the talk and start taking decisive action. At the end of the day, listener, we cannot be afraid of legal challenges to say, well, look, if I take this step to try and improve the service, I may be faced with legal action. People will file legal actions regardless of what. But once you are confident that you have acted within the remit of the four corners of the law and you have acted within your constitutional authority, then my point is take the steps for the improvement of the service, for the improvement of the efficiency of the judicial process, and let the chips fall where they may if people wish to take legal action. But at least you would have done your part in terms of trying to bring about tangible and substantive improvement.
I've got to take a short break, so that will give you a chance to get a sip of coffee or something, Martin George, and we'll continue right after.
Thank you.
Join our HD video stream. Log on to sky995fm.com.